I'm John Banther, and this is Classical Breakdown. From WETA Classical in Washington, we are your guide to classical music. In this episode, I'm joined by WETA Classical's Linda Carducci, and we're talking about the Piano Concerto in A minor by Clara Wieck Schumann. It's one of the more extraordinary concertos in the canon, in that it was composed at a very young age. It breaks tradition with the middle movement, and at the premiere, it was just a fraction of the concert. Stay with us to the end as we show you what to listen for across each movement and how it fits in with other concertos of the time. I think, Linda, that this concerto, the best, although I really hate to use that word best, but it feels like this might be the best concerto written by a teenager in the 19th century. She completed it when she was 15, and that's earlier than pretty much any other concerto composer that is still in the repertoire today. And it sounds so remarkably more mature than you would guess. I mean, compared to all of the other concertos that we hear by young composers like Mozart and Beethoven and so on.
Oh, for sure. And she was 13, of course, when she started this. But
Yes.
it is quite adventurous for a young 13 to 15-year-old.
Mhm.
And it's quite innovative and it's ambitious. I think it just shows her confidence. You know, she was already being acclaimed as a pianist. So
Yeah.
she was already getting boosted by that. And I think that this shows her confidence in being able to write a composition.
And we learned all about her life in episode 60, so after this, definitely check that one out. But before we jump into the concerto, let's read a quick listener review. What do we have, Linda?
Well, we had a nice comment from Joshua S., who gave us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Thank you. Joshua wrote under the heading, Broadening My Understanding and Appreciation. As a music lover of many genres, I have little formal background, but I have come to love the sweeping breadth and depth of classical music. This podcast has helped me become a better listener and brought to my attention many composers that I would not have otherwise known. My wife and I attend concerts, operas, and chamber music recitals often, and this podcast has truly deepened our appreciation and connection to the music. Thank you. Well, we thank you, Joshua S., for that nice comment.
Yes, thank you so much, Joshua S. And I love that. Yes, you are attending concerts and operas and all of these things, and I guess using the podcast as a companion to that. That's exactly what we want. Now, looking at her concerto, she completed this, her Opus 7, in 1835, and while we have a laundry list of 19th century piano concertos that are popular today, it wasn't the same back then. So just looking for a second at the 1820s and 1830s, what's being performed? It's not all of the Beethoven and Mozart we know today. There's a lot of survivor bias, I think, in music. But there were a lot of other composers popular, right, Linda?
Yes, remember that this is the Romantic era now, so things were very expressive and free and emotional as compared to the structured century that came before it, the 18th century. So yes, this era, the audiences seem to prefer flashier virtuoso works by composers of that day. So we're looking at John Field, for example, Thalberg. And there was a composer by the name of Johann Pixus, big virtuoso piano works in the Romantic vein. That's what was popular.
I mean, out of those composers that you mentioned, the only one that I was familiar with is John Field. These other ones, not so much, but these are great pianists of their time that are writing concertos for themselves, and they are on tour doing their thing, kind of similar to what Clara is starting to do. And all of the stuff by Franz Liszt or Robert Schumann or Johannes Brahms, those concertos are still like decades away. And a lot of what's being cemented in some of the ideas for this starts right here in the 1820s with people like Chopin and also Clara Wieck Schumann. It starts off quite exciting. A big theme is introduced by the orchestra, and then we get a softer repeat of it just a moment later in the oboe. And when the piano comes in, Linda, it is declamatory, which is kind of like what I might expect from a concerto written by a teenager. As you said, this is a time where things are kind of virtuosic and flashy, and I imagine if I'm writing something for myself, I'm going to have a grand entrance. And that's certainly what she does here.
She does, with octaves, which can be very difficult to play, especially when you're playing them fast. I thought, John, the opening was reminiscent of the opening of the Grieg Piano Concerto.
Yeah, there's I heard someone describing like Robert Schumann's concerto and Grieg's. Their openings are like the reverse of this, of something big and then going down.
Oh,
And this is,
yes.
low going high.
Yes.
There's that idea there. Something I noticed from the beginning is how she is able to juxtapose big, intense piano sounds with softer ones. I think she does some drama in the music with that. And I think another part of the drama she inserts in the music, Linda, are the extra flourishes, repeated notes. I find that the emotion and everything is intensified with this. It's like indulgent, as if there's too many notes, too much to express, and not enough time to do it. I don't want to say angsty, with a teenager or something, but there is something here there's not enough space to get all of this out.
I agree with you. There's some wonderful alternating, slow, lyrical, beautiful passages with alternating with the orchestral drama and these little fioratura, these little embellishments in the piano, the little filigrees, embellishments that we see so often in Chopin.
I also appreciate how she is able to write for piano and winds in a way that they're just kind of coming in and out of the fold together, and it's the strings that add this kind of weight and gravitas from time to time.
The winds add so much. At times, just this ethereal sort of background, almost an atmosphere that just melds so beautifully in the orchestration. But I agree with you about the strings. Sometimes they're very weighty. They can add the drama.
With the winds, I think part of it is this, we hear in one point in it, there's like a bassoon that comes in, and the piano is, there's not a flirtatious connection here, but there's something with a wind player is trying to get the attention of the piano, and the piano notices but is ignoring, just kind of doing its own thing in some kind of playful type way.
John, she wrote this in the key of A minor. And by the way, incidentally and interestingly, when Robert Schumann, her husband-to-be, wrote his piano concerto, many years later, he wrote his in the key of A minor, too. But anyway, key of A minor has no sharps or flats because it is a minor. So it takes its sharps or flats, that is its key signature, from its relative major, which in this case is the key of C major. And C major has no sharps or flats. And it's very common for composers to wind their way through various key signatures in the middle of a piece, in the middle of a movement, away from the home key. But they don't always actually change the key signature on the staff while they're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
They just do it by way of accidentals, sharps and flats.
Yes, the accidentals, I don't know how much we've mentioned this. That's when you have a literal sharp or flat written in next to the note to indicate to you that the note is either raised or lowered, because that is not what is naturally within the key. So if you have no sharps or flats, and now you're going from A minor to E major for a moment, you might find a G sharp, a sharp written in front of a G.
Sure.
And I think that is true. I mean, I don't have as much experience playing any of this music because it is like 20, 30 years before, the tuba's really coming in, and they don't always include tuba. But I think that is true. They're not going to write all of the different keys in that they would. That seems on one side, it seems kind of like maybe elementary, but, obviously she's moved beyond that. I don't have all the answers for that, but that is something that is happening here, where you do see it written into the score. We're going to this key, to that key, to that key, maybe for only 16 bars,
Sure.
or much less than that.
Sure.
But that is not something you're right. I think that's not something you see.
No, and I noticed that quite prevalently in the first and the third movements.
Any musicologists are welcome to fill us in more on that. There are a lot of playful aspects to this, and I think one of those things is how the left hand takes the theme and then it tries to break through. It's kind of starting and stopping, and it's ascending, and we get these moments that were in the opening minor. Now they're major, and we also get little glimpses or glimmers, Linda, it feels like, of the next 70 years of music. There'll be like a moment you hear, oh, this is what Chopin's going to do in a little bit. Or Brahms, for example, you get a little tiny glimpse of things. And actually, we should mention, Linda, the recording we're sampling from here is Beatrice Rana, her recording with the Chamber Orchestra of Europe, and Yannick Nézet-Séguin conducting. And we actually did an interview with her, Nicole Lacroix did, and you can find that at classicalscore.org. But I wanted to read one of the things talking about how fulfilling this is to play. And Rana said, "It's definitely fulfilling to play because the approach to the composition is one of a great virtuoso writing a concerto for herself as a pianist. It's very similar to the approach that Chopin or Liszt had writing their concerti, very similar to the first piano concerto by Frédéric Chopin." And Chopin's first piano concerto was just before this.
It was just before that.
Yeah.
So we don't know if she actually heard that. He played it in Poland, of course, originally. By the way, what Beatrice Rana was mentioning is true. I mean, this is a virtuoso piece, and I think it shows great, extraordinary maturity in how it's written. For a 13 to 15-year-old, it's just absolutely extraordinary. But I don't think that it's flashy for the sake of being flashy. When Clara Schumann got to be a little bit older, she sort of looked down at the flashiness of Franz Liszt. She thought, maybe a little too flashy, maybe there should be a little bit more substance to it. But I never get the impression with this young concerto of Clara Schumann that she was being flashy for the sake of being flashy.
No big cadenzas all of a sudden where she is just, commanding something from the orchestra to come back in. No huge recapitulation either, as well.
Right.
But something that happens at the ends of these movements, I think, is a little foreshadowing into the next. It really starts to wind down, and there's this moment for the cello, which is doubled very softly in the clarinet. You'll hear that. And it feels like this is a bit of foreshadowing into the next movement, and I think the next movement itself has some foreshadowing for the final movement. But that's the opening movement of the concerto, and as I think we've already alluded to, it does flow from one movement into the next. It is kind of seamless. But let's look at when she wrote this, because she started it, as you said, Linda, when she was 13 years old in 1833. She's already been embarking on concert tours since the age of 11. So, I mean, this is someone we call like a prodigy. That's kind of a catch-all term for someone doing this at this age. But what is so remarkable is that she's not just playing at the keyboard, she's writing. And she wrote a whole first movement and performed it that year when she was 13 years old. Did her feet reach all the way to the pedal? I don't know how tall 13-year-olds are, but I feel like there has to be something with that.
She started touring when she was 11, as you say, and her father, Friedrich Wieck, was, I don't know if I want to say a taskmaster, but he was very rigorous with her. He made sure she had a rigorous music education in piano composition, harmony, theory.
Yeah.
So by the age of 11, 13, she's almost a veteran, and her mind was crafted around that from such a young age.
That's a good point. She doesn't have a rounded education, maybe like someone we want to have today. It's all music, it sounds like. And that's also the luxury or privilege of coming from a family with the means to do so.
Yeah.
And not having to work like many other 13-year-olds in the 19th century. We should also mention that there was another orchestration of this during this time. Robert Schumann was already familiar with the family and with Clara, and he had actually helped her with orchestration, done some editing and all this stuff. And then she undid all of it, thankfully, because I think it works perfect as it is. But she undid all of that, and I think it was her father that also encouraged her to write this out into something bigger, 3 movements, not just one.
That's right. Originally, it was just an original one movement, single movement work, the Concertstaats, which was not unusual for a single movement work to be almost laid out like a piano concerto with piano and orchestra. But you're right. Her father is the one who encouraged her to expand it, make it a multi-movement piano concerto.
Now, we're saying her father said to expand it, and she expands it and doesn't at the same time, and that has to do with the second movement, which I find to be so remarkable. Few concertos do something like this, and especially in a live setting, it has the real potential for magic, because as it starts, the piano is alone, and it really feels like not any other slow piano concerto movement, but like many others. It's a lovely tune. It's played with some kind of expectation or expectantly. We often hear the strings or the piano start a movement like this with the idea someone else is coming in. We are creating some tension that someone else is going to take over. But that slowly fades away here, and the orchestra doesn't come in.
Not at all. The orchestra doesn't appear at all in this second movement.
And it's like when you have this pianist, here, Clara, imagine when she's, 15 at the keyboard, the entire concert hall, the entire orchestra, it's like everyone slowly focuses in on just piano. And I think it is kind of slow how it kind of lulls you into this new world, and you don't even realize you are in this whole new kind of piece. You forgot there's a concerto, and then suddenly a cello gently enters, and it's this beautiful duet on stage.
It certainly is. Every piece has its own integrity, so it's not sort of fair to compare pieces to other composers' pieces, but I really find that there are some similarities in what Clara wrote in the first movement too, but certainly in the second movement melody, Frédéric Chopin.
Yeah.
And his nocturnes that had just beautiful lyrical treble melody, accompanied by it's harmony that's supporting it, harmony that's not independent or fighting it, but harmony that is supporting it in the left hand, beautiful harmony. She wrote this second movement and titled it Romanza,
Yeah.
which in music refers to a slow, tender work, often personal in nature.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this second movement is. I think it's chamber music, John, almost with the cello and piano alone.
It really is. You get hypnotized and everything goes dark when you're in the concert hall watching this. And compared to the first movement, which has these extra fills and things which in a way feel intentionally superfluous, here we have these extra things and no, we need all of this. This is all mine. This has to happen. This is an extra. And it's just beautiful.
It's almost like it's a distillation, isn't it, from what we just heard with the big orchestra and the fioritura and the embellishments and all of the first movement. Things are all distilled down now to quiet, just two instruments.
Something that she does write in the music that I do find interesting is at the top she writes La melodia ben marcato e legato. So the melody is marcato and legato, which sounds contradictory, right? Something is marked and, accented in a way, but also legato, very smooth and connected at the same time.
Yeah, marcato would imply, as you say, almost an attack of each note. Not staccato, really, but an attack on each note, which seems contradictory to a legato, which is a smooth connection between the notes. Another thing about this particular movement, the second movement, it is a dialogue. It's very lyrical, but I think it's interesting that she would include chamber music within a concerto, and it is sort of chamber music, but it's also a foreshadowing, I think, because Clara went on after she was a teenager to write chamber music, and beautiful lyrical chamber music, sometimes for violin and piano, but still this is almost a foreshadowing, and I think it shows her skill at writing on a smaller scale of chamber music.
And it's a shame that this is the only orchestral output we have from her. This is it. Everything else is piano or smaller, and she basically stops writing entirely when she's like 37, when Robert Schumann dies. So this is unfortunately all we have from her in this aspect. But we also hear some foreshadowing at the end of the movement with the timpani. The timpani comes in with these rolls on a whole note, and it's very maybe thunder in the distance. Something's approaching.
Something's brewing.
Yes.
The other thing that's interesting about this second movement is how it influenced Brahms. Now, Brahms would write his second piano concerto many years after Clara.
Yeah.
But he was acquainted with the Schumann family. He knew their music. He was very fond of Clara. And so years later, when he wrote his second piano concerto, he almost mirrored what Clara did with that second movement, because he has a beautiful dialogue between cello and piano in the slow movement of his own piano concerto number 2, which again, many years later. So was that maybe a reference, maybe an homage to Clara when Brahms wrote that?
Maybe something, and that's what I mean by you get these glimpses of music and things that people would come to do in the coming decades. Now, let's look at the premiere of the concerto because I find this interesting as well. You found some great information on this, Linda. I know it was premiered on November 9th in 1835
Yes.
with a Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra and Felix Mendelssohn conducting.
Yeah.
So Clara is 16, Mendelssohn is like 26. Just to say, these are young people influencing music and what's happening on stage, which is a little bit different than what we see in the 20th century with an emphasis on much older conductors at times. So I
Yes.
think that's just to mention. But tell us what else she was playing on this concert.
Yeah, it was pretty much a Clara concert. So she was playing her own piano concerto, but on the same program, she played Mendelssohn in the premiere of Mendelssohn's Capriccio in B minor, a set of variations by Heinrich Hertz, again from the Romantic era, and Bach's Concerto for three pianos, with Mendelssohn also playing the piano.
Yeah.
So Clara was definitely in the spotlight in that entire program that evening.
This is so remarkable as you think about it because for a player like Clara, when we say like a professional pianist, playing all of this rep, yeah, they can do that. This pianist we're hearing, Beatrice Rana, yeah, she can, if she had to, she can play all this rep. You're in your 20s, you should be able to do that. In your 30s, you should be able to do it at a much different intellectual level than in your 20s, I think.
For sure.
When you're 16, if I had a 16-year-old student and they said they're going to do all this, you might say, let's focus on your concerto and maybe the Mendelssohn premiere. You don't need to do this set of variation and this Bach concerto. Let's focus on, because this is your concerto that you're premiering, let's focus on this, okay?
Yeah.
No, we're going to do all these things.
Yeah.
That's just, I find that remarkable to have that all going on. But again, like you said, this is probably 10 years into her career, basically.
Yeah, she was getting to be a veteran at this age.
And she played it, like, I think 7 times total in the coming years?
Yes, she did. Many years after the premiere, she would perform it, sometimes to not great review. But she kept going with it, and it did gain a lot of acceptance and appreciation in the ensuing years.
Let's go into the finale now, which, as I mentioned, I think there's a little bit of foreshadowing with that timpani, because the timpani comes in here with the trumpet, and it's this really interesting call. And I just want to note that it doesn't all go all the way to the downbeat. The orchestra and the trumpet, they all drop out on the downbeat when the piano comes in. It's kind of like it's not a shock. It's like I don't want to say like a slap in the face, but it's a sudden drop in the sound, which makes it very, very exciting. And when you hear it happen later, they continue to the downbeat. Da, 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 down. They go all the way to the downbeat.
Mm-hmm.
But for this first one, at least, it drops out, and Clara has to get a huge sound out of the piano on the downbeat. So this is a very exciting finale, too.
Yeah, there's no question that this is a virtuosic work for piano.
The declamatory entrance has some really intense playing in the right hand in octaves, which seems to me very difficult. I mean, I barely passed or technically failed my piano class, I think. Playing in octaves with your hand, because your hand is having to go up and down for each note, compared to a melody where your fingers are going up and down, but now your whole hand has to act as like a lever or something to get all of these notes out. I feel like that's got to be hard.
It is hard, and it's almost done in a marcato. We were talking about before a marcato,
Yes.
which is an attack on each thing, as opposed to legato, which is a slow, smooth connection between notes. You can't really do that slow, smooth connection between notes very much when you have octaves in the right hand. So they have to be almost an attack, marcato. And yes, your hand has to be sort of in this fixed position, because you have to hit every note and the note below it, which is an octave, same note, but below or above it, the same.
Yeah.
So you can't, move around your hand very much while you're doing this. And it's tough to play that fast.
Yeah. And while there's a lot of concertos, especially the ones that follow, they'll have like a huge opening for a finale, and then the orchestra takes over for a while, letting the pianist kind of breathe for a moment. But that's only happening occasionally here, and it's kind of brief. it's only a brief respite for the pianist when the orchestra's doing something. In the finale, I think there's a moment that is one of the most dramatic and evocative, Linda. And I'm trying to think, what is it like to have a 13-year-old writing this in the other room? I mean, with all this drama and emotion that is, way beyond what you'd expect for a 13-year-old. What could they what's an argument like in that house? You can't go clean your room. No, it's got to be something like fix those parallel fifths or no dessert.
Yeah.
Not in this house, Clara. We don't do that here.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's a remarkable sound that really this for me is just a beautiful moment.
Yeah, this entire third movement is really the bulk of the piece. It's almost half of the time of the entire piece. The half of the length of the entire piece is this movement, and I think it's worth keeping in mind as we listen to this that this was the first piece that she wrote. She intended it to be a single movement work, just this third movement.
Yeah.
So she was putting her all into this third movement, and it is quite substantial.
Yeah.
Now, of course, she tacked on a first and second movement later, but I think it's helpful to consider that while we're listening to this third movement, that this was what she considered and wanted originally to be her own single original piece.
That's a good point. It kind of makes me think that the beautiful wind stuff we hear like in the first movement is born out of the third movement, because there's some great interaction that I was talking about earlier with the winds and how bassoon is doing something and the piano has got all this luscious fill that's sort of flirtation, just kind of ignoring the bassoon, ignoring it.
Yes.
And then, it actually comes back later in a different instrument, sort of, but I feel like there's a lot happening here that was expanded out into the first two.
Absolutely. And while we may think of this third movement as sort of free form, that is, though it doesn't have a structure, certainly not a structure like a sonata form of the 18th century, it actually is a rondo form. It's sort of a loose rondo.
Loose, yeah.
A rondo is a form that it takes a theme and then alternates that theme with contrasting material. So we will continue during this third movement to hear the main melody, the main theme, come in and out. And then it contrasts and alternates with other material.
Yeah, and that's how we just get those brief respites when the orchestra is playing, because then the piano has to come back in with something a little more interesting than what they left off with.
Yeah.
These things tend to also build up, but at the same time, she also brings it down at moments to create tension. This piece, as big as it never quite gets towering, and I think that is also a reminder of, hey, this is 1835, and some of the big orchestral stuff, it was starting to happen, but it was really happening later. And so this is an orchestra that sounds almost bigger than the sum of its parts for the time, I think. And I imagine that there was also a talk of, well, I was going to say, I wonder if they told Clara, these are the instruments you can write for the orchestra.
Yeah.
As opposed to, all the extra musicians as well. Maybe that's not something that actually that happened, but I do wonder if there was that idea to it as well that kind of keeps it contained, but she still does a lot of big sounds with it.
Well, if we consider, John, what was she influenced by when she wrote this piano concerto? Who influenced her? And when we said that we don't think she heard the Chopin concerti
right
at this point, she probably heard John Field's work.
Yeah.
And John Field was a great pianist himself. And would do all these nice embellishments with his music. And John Field, by the way, was a great influence on Frédéric Chopin.
Yeah, all the nocturnes and everything.
Yeah, and we know that Clara heard, I believe, the Thalberg concerto, and she may have heard Hummel's concertos, who also was going in that direction of doing,
That's true. Yeah, Hummel's always going to be a little flashy.
Yeah, that's right. So these things may have influenced her a little bit, maybe even in terms of the orchestration that you're talking about. But I think that she always kept it tasteful. As I said, when she got older, she was not in favor of some of the flashiness that Franz Liszt would do. I think that Clara kept it pretty tasteful here.
She still does add some extra repeated notes within this finale that also adds tension as well. And then she slowly builds it back up. The energy starts to pick up, takes us back to the opening minor theme, a couple of little surprises as well. And then we get to a moment where it's like you expect another wind instrument to enter, maybe another flirty bassoon, but now this time it is the flute that takes over, and it seems like there's a little more acknowledgement from the piano in this moment.
There's also a section too around this. Now we're getting to, like sort of toward the end of the piece where the piano has a solo, a beautiful, sweet solo. In fact, I think she marks it dolce, which is sweet. Again, reminiscent of Frédéric Chopin. I think even more so than reminiscent of what Robert Schumann would come to write with his piano work.
So like an indulgence, still all the way to the end.
Yes, yeah. And a beautiful melody, lyrical melody, which Chopin was wonderful for. No fighting harmonies, but supporting harmonies, beautiful harmonies in the left hand with with sometimes arpeggios and not big, flashy chords, especially in these solo dolce segments.
But in terms of chords, I've read that she actually had some great advantage or ability in that she had large hands, or she had a large span of her hands as well, where she was able to play tenths or maybe even larger intervals just fine. I saw offhand, I think it was like on Reddit, someone said that their dad's a pianist and was at the Clara Schumann Museum or something, and there's a cast of her hand, and he said like her hand dwarfed his hand, and he's a pianist too. So that's also a part of her playing that you see, not small but really wide chords and voicing as well.
Interesting. I guess we shouldn't be surprised. This is quite a virtuosic work.
And I'll put there's some pictures too of like the cast of her hand. I mean, you can't tell by looking at it. I guess there's nothing to compare it to on the screen, but you get a glimpse of her hand, which I think is nice. The end is very fun. It is energetic, and these offbeats add so much excitement, and I'm wondering how much of this was a trend at the time. Because remember, she's writing a concerto for herself. This is her playing this on stage on this big premiere. And how it ends is how people leave with it. That is the truth in music, and everyone knows it. How the concert ends is how people walk away from it. You can get away with some crazy stuff in the first half. Things can go terribly wrong, but if you end okay, it works out. And this just sounds like a very fun, exciting end that I don't hear, all that often. Maybe it works better when it's a shorter concerto, but it's just very exciting.
Oh, it's a thrilling end. And as you say, John, she has these offbeats. And I kind of wondered, how did she come up with this idea? Again, she didn't hear the Chopin concerti. We don't think so. And I don't think that was really a hallmark of Chopin that much anyway.
No.
I looked at the Thalberg score, some of his concerti. I didn't especially see offbeats there. So I give her a lot of credit for coming up. I mean, it was quite exciting to do these offbeats.
It's exciting, and actually thinking about it, for the orchestra, this doesn't seem like a hard piece to put together. There's no second movement, basically. It's just the principal cello.
That's right.
And actually, if you see this concert live, I would really look for any interaction, which you're probably going to anyway, between piano and cello, because depending on how the piano is, how close it is to the front of the stage, when they look up, they're looking at principal cello. Just as how the seating works out. So interesting to see if there's any lovely eyes gazing at each other in that.
Sometimes in piano concertos, you'll hear people describe them as being a dialogue between a piano and an orchestra.
Yeah.
And I think Mozart did that somewhat.
Yeah.
But sometimes I've heard them described as, and I agree with them, is sometimes it's a little bit of a fight. It's a little bit of a competition going on here. They're kind of battling each other, not in a bad way, really, but kind of having fun battling each other. As I was reading the score of this particular concerto of Clara Schumann, I came away with different opinions. At times I thought there was a definite supporting sense with the orchestra supporting her as the piano soloist. But then at other times I thought, no, she's the pianist here, and this is definitely a virtuosic piano concerto, and the orchestra is back there, but this is the piano trying to take spotlight here.
Yeah, it's like the idea of the pianist turning and fighting with the orchestra, that feels like that's so much later. That comes with decades later with Liszt and others, right? But that's already starting here in the 1820s and 30s with a trend with her. Another trend she started, actually, I believe, was playing from memory Bach and Beethoven.
Oh, yes.
People weren't playing these works or concertos from memory. Today, almost everyone does. Some people don't. That's a personal choice. But she was part of the people that really cemented that, playing from memory.
Yeah, something, again, that was adventurous and innovative.
That's definitely part of her legacy with this piece. And talking about, the reception and legacy, it's definitely become more popular, I think, this concerto in the last 10 years with everything that's happened in music and representation. One thing I find disappointing is that when you do look this up, when you look up, I was looking for performances on YouTube to put on the show notes page. Almost all the recordings and performances are of women. There's very few men that are actually playing this concerto, which for myself I found a little disappointing
Hmm.
because there is so much here to get into, and remarkably so that it's from someone that's a teenager as well.
Yeah. And I have to wonder, too, when you are a successful instrumentalist, like
Hmm.
she was, starting at the age of 11 already on the concert stage, sometimes when you are a wonderful instrumentalist and you decide to compose, you're not really taken as seriously as you should be.
Hmm.
They think, well, you're just sort of composing on the side. You're really a performer. And I don't know if Clara had that sense at that young age when she was composing this work, and as if to say, "No, I'll show you. I can compose." I don't understand. I don't know whether she had that sense or not, or if she just thought, "Hey, I'm a composer just equally as much as I am a pianist."
And the last thing I have on this with the legacy and also, how there's men that aren't performing this. A big part of it is recording and also us as listeners and what we value. Beatrice Rana has a fantastic recording here with Yannick Nézet-Séguin and the Chamber Orchestra of Europe. There's been other good recordings, but, and I also mean this with peace and love, I think of Florence Price
Mhm,
and an orchestra and some orchestras that recorded her music early on,
mhm.
and then her music was, or of course it was ignored. But then the Philadelphia Orchestra recorded it. Now it's different. Now people are playing her music more, and those recordings, as good as the first ones were, the Philadelphia ones with Yannick, it is different. It is very, very different, and it is only because we've not accepted the value that something has until someone else comes and does it. So I think that's part of it. The more if this concerto gets bigger or more popular on the stage, more men will play it. But until then, maybe artistic advisors and some, no, this is not going to fill the seats the way that I want. So it's kind of, I feel like there's a kind of death spiral with
Yes,
our way of thinking that leads to this.
yes.
Because remember, when Clara and Mendelssohn premiered this, they could still be on their parents' health insurance plan. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, that's all I have for this piano concerto, Linda. Do you have anything else?
No, just to say that she showed her mettle, certainly here as a pianist and as a composer with this very early work, an impressive work from a teenager.
Thanks for listening to Classical Breakdown, your guide to classical music. For more information on this episode, visit the show notes page at classicalbreakdown.org. You can send me comments and episode ideas to classicalbreakdown@weta.org. And if you enjoyed this episode, leave a review in your podcast app. I'm John Banther. Thanks for listening to Classical Breakdown from WETA Classical.